Hey everybody, welcome back to the final video number 4. Here we're going to focus on the king of DevOps, Azure DevOps, and king in the Microsoft world, that is. So I know there's other tools out there as well. But in any event, so Azure DevOps is here for the Power Platform in the Microsoft land, and this is a really great tool. Now, this comes with a caveat that you can't just use Azure DevOps in and of itself. I guess you really could if you did a couple of, well, anyway. There's always like 10 ways to do things in Microsoft land, but nonetheless, this is by far the simplest and the easiest to do. All right, so video number 2 is the prerequisite for this video, okay? And video number 1, if you're going to use a service principal, is a really quick way of creating a service principal account with my script here. That I have a link still in the description of the video with all of the links everywhere that I've gone through the series. So these will be consistent across the video, and I'll probably create one huge master class video so that you don't have to go into the 4 different videos. You can just watch the big, huge, gargantuan, very long video. All right, so in any event, here is the final video for you guys. So here we are to recap or to set this video up. I've back into the development environment. So if you've been watching this series up till now, this will all make sense. My development environment is the default environment, and my production environment is this David Soden's environment. And so you can see here's the solution that we've been using in this video series is the HRPTO. And you've seen inside of it with the other videos, so I'm not going to go back into them. But you can also see that I've reset the version back to 1.0.0. And down here in the files that I have downloaded, actually, let me get rid of this guy because that was the file that downloaded from the previous video in number 3. And we want to come up a layer. And what we're going to focus on today is Azure DevOps. And so I have a template file for you, which is a pipeline template, and this will go into Azure DevOps. And so here we are over in the Azure DevOps land. I don't have anything configured, okay? So we're going to set this up 100% from scratch so you don't miss a beat. Okay, I'm no longer going to need this very long command because I'm not using PowerShell anymore. So let me just get rid of this and delete it, but I still I'm going to want to use and need to use all of this information here. And I'm going to show you how to set all this up. Okay, so with this, hopefully you have something similar. One of the things I showed you in video number 3, so I'm not going to go through it again. If you haven't seen video number 3, go ahead and go through it. I show you where to get the URLs. Without going into too much detail, essentially you come over here into this environment area, and then from inside of here, you click into the environment name, and in the details screen, for the environment, I'll do this one real quick. Up under this details, here is the environment URL. So this is where I grabbed it to plug it into here. Again, I went into great detail in the other video. Not going to go into much more than what I just did. All right, so that being said, let's switch back over to Azure DevOps. First thing we need to do is create a project. Now, a project is really neat because it allows you to create everything that you're going to do on a project, including pipelines. So we'll just call this ALM. ALM Power Platform Azure DevOps. Seems good enough, right? Okay, create project. That's all you have to do. You don't have to worry about setting anything else because you're going to want it private. Obviously, you're not going to want to have everybody in. Well, maybe you do. If you want a public one, then go ahead and set it up. All right, so with it being set up, this is what you get out of the box, guys. You get the general information, you get the boards, you get the repo, which is a Git repository by default, and then here's the pipelines, okay? So I'm going to assume that you don't know anything or you don't know much about Azure DevOps, but you want to use or get to know Azure DevOps. Now, maybe your team is already using the boards, and you're using this much like you would use Jira, and you have your sprints, your backlogs, and all your work boards and all that stuff already set up. So maybe this is the only thing you're using. And maybe you have other projects where you are using the repo, but you're doing traditional dev. But now you're not really quite sure how to use this with Power Platform. A couple things that you need to do. So I'm going to go, see this breadcrumb thing up here? This shows you kind of how many layers deep in the onion you are. I'm going to go all the way back out to the organization, which is what I'm calling DSoden Lab. Now, you can have multiple organizations out under your login ID if you so choose, but most people just have one. So with that being said, in the organization or at the organizational level, I want you to take notice at the bottom left corner. See, this says organizational settings. this changes contextually as I go into a project, right? So now it says project settings. If I go back out to DSOD and Lab, which is the organization layer, I have organization settings. So this is where you set up everything for Azure DevOps as a whole, including settings for your pipelines and securities and all this other stuff. So this stuff can be set out here. So if you want to apply security to pipelines and different things, here's some global settings essentially for pipelines and all this other stuff. But if you want to go into granular as it relates to what you're setting up in a project, then that information is contextually at that next layer of the onion down in. So then you want to do is you want to dig into project settings. And so this is one of the first things we're going to want to hang out and do, because we have two things we have to set up. The first thing that we need to set up is down here into pipelines. We need to set up service connections. Now the service connections is this. This is what we're going to set up. We got to set up two connections. One connection for dev, one connection for prod, using this service principal account, okay? So that's straightforward and pretty easy. The one other problem that we have is we need to get the build tools. Remember I told you Power Platform build tools? We need to install those. Well, those are called extensions, and those extensions are installed at the organizational level. So just like I showed you before, click back out to the organizational level, come down here to organizational settings, and if you come down here, now you see extensions under general. Right now, I have this installed in my area, okay? So you can see that it's there. I'm going to uninstall it just so that we can actually show you what to do, because yours is going to be completely blank, all right? So one of the things you want to do is browse the marketplace. So we'll go ahead and click Browse Marketplace, and you want to type in Power Platform Build Tool. And I think it's plural, tools. And here it is. You want to look for this purple logo, at least as of the date of this recording, 5/19/2022. Okay, so if you click on it, you can choose Get for Free, and you click it, and I'm clicking Get for Free, and now it's saying, hey, I'm going to connect you to Azure DevOps. I only have the one organization, as you saw earlier. I'm going to choose Install. Now, as soon as I do that, it's all good. I can proceed to my organization. It's going to kick me back into Azure DevOps to the very front. And if I go to organizational settings again, and I come down here to extensions, once again, I have the Power Platform build tools installed. So that takes care of prerequisite number one. Prerequisite number two is what I told you earlier, where we need to set up connections to the dev and the production environment. And so that's done under the project settings. We have to scroll down under pipelines, and down here under service connections, we need to set up two connections. So let's click Create Service Connection. Now, with the Power Platform build tools, they give you this Power Platform connector, service connector. So go ahead and scroll down and choose it. If you didn't want to scroll down, you could type in Power like this, and it'll come up and bubble up to the top. Either way, that's the connector that you want to use. So this is the server URL. So this is what this really is saying, and this is where most people maybe get spun around. They're like, I don't know what the server URL. What server URL? What they're talking about is the environment URL, not the server URL. I mean, technically it is a server, but I think it would be better labeled as environment URL to speak in native Power Platform languages. So in any event, I'm going to set up dev first. So I'm going to copy out my URL because this is my server URL. And now I just go back to the service principal. I copy out my tenant ID, the application ID, just a lot of copying and pasting. Make sure you get them right, guys, because if you screw this up, you'll get errors and you will be chasing your tail trying to find out what the heck happened. And those GUIDs can get pretty gnarly if you miss just one letter or one digit or character. Okay, so this is my dev environment. I'm simply just going to call this dev to keep it really, really easy. The description I don't need, and I do want to select grant permissions to all pipelines. Hit save. Okay, I now have a dev environment. And so I'll choose not now. And ideally, I wish I could just kind of clone this. I don't think I can. Is there a save as? No. Cancel. I don't have a copy. duplicate? No. Can I select? No. Okay, so no way around it. You can't copy and paste and cheat. You got to come over here. Yep. All right, so just do this all over again. I'm going to scroll down, click Power Platform, next. We're going to do this rigmarole all over again, but this time this is going to be the production environment. We want to grab the production URL, paste that in here. The tenant, application ID, and client secret are all identical because we're using the same account and we granted the same account access to both areas. Now, I want you to understand something. If you have a multi-environment, I'm only using 2 in my simple use case here. If you had, you can set up multiple service accounts to connect the different environments to make it even more secure. But just know that when you do that, make sure you keep track of who's on first, what's on second, and who you granted administrative or system administrative access into those service accounts, because if you lose track of things, you're going to have an issue. The main thing, though, is you just want to make sure that you set up the right account with the right environment. So to keep things simple, I have one account who's a system administrator in both my production and dev environment. In a real-world scenario, honestly, I would advise against it. I would use 2 separate service accounts, 2 separate service principals, and 2 separate, maybe, allowing access in for users. But I would only grant that in scope to just the prod. Okay, so 1 account for prod, and maybe for dev and QA and UAT, that doesn't matter because you're not using production data. Maybe that's okay to use shared accounts. That would probably be a best practice strategy for you guys to follow. All right, so all of this being said, I now have my production environment set up and connection. All the information's here. I'm going to go ahead and click save. You can see now I have a dev and a prod. Now I need to just simply go back into my project. So I'll click out here to the second item, which will now take me into Azure DevOps for this particular project. I keep getting my pop-ups. So now what we need to do is come down here to pipelines, and I don't have any pipelines. So I need to import that pipeline template, and I can do that by this vertical ellipsis. I can choose import a pipeline. So now I'm going to browse, and I'm going to browse to my downloads folder because that's where I have it. And I'm going to drill all the way through until I see Azure DevOps. Click into that. And this is the template. It says template, but it's a JSON file. So go ahead and click that and choose import. That will import the pipeline with all of the steps. Now you're going to have to go in and do a little bit of configuration, but not much. Okay, so don't click anything when you get to this screen. Just like freeze and don't do anything because you've got several layers that you need to do. It's hard to see, but right now Azure DevOps has landed you on this pipeline item. And it's telling you some settings need your attention. And we've got we've got this all the way through. So let's go through this piece by piece, starting at the top where it lands you at pipeline. Coming over here to the agent pool area, it wants you to select something. So from the pull down, choose hosted Azure pipelines. Okay. Now I do need to, let's see here. Let me do this. There's a disclaimer that I need to make. Power Platform, build tools. Let's see here. I think, yeah, this is it. Okay, so somewhere down here, there is this disclaimer. Or there used to be a disclaimer. I don't know what happened to it. Let's see. Let me see if I can. All right. Anyway, I'm going to have to come back to this. What I needed to tell you, or what I was trying to show you that I can't seem to find right now, is that Azure DevOps, when you set it up as a brand new customer, like if you go up to Azure DevOps, sign up, get an account, it's not going to give you a pipeline to use. Like you won't have this free hosted Azure pipeline. It's going to tell you that you need to, do whatever. If you're an individual, you can get one, I forget what they call it. It's one pipeline or one ability to it's a unit of one, a measurement of one. There's a specific term for it, and for the life of me, I can't remember what it is. But essentially what it is this hosted pipeline, and then they only give you one of it. And if you're an individual, you can do it for free, and they give you like so much space for free. You'll see all of that when you sign up, but make sure you send the email requesting access to get a free pipeline unit or whatever it's called. And when you do that, then you'll be able to follow along completely. So this video may take you 2 or 3 days to follow through with and actually set it up. If you don't already have an Azure DevOps subscription and you're setting that up for the first time, just know that you are going to have to send that request email. Read everything very carefully when you sign up, because it will tell you about it. And even when you're doing this, at some point it will tell you, click here to send an email to request access. So just make sure you read everything. Okay. So assuming you've got everything you need, you want to set Azure Pipeline hosted here. And I always use Windows latest here on that side. So that's it for pipeline. That's already configured now. Now let's click to the next layer in this onion, get sources. So all we simply have to do is just look down here, and what it's complaining about is it wants to know what my branch is. And I don't have a branch set up right now because I didn't do anything with my repository. So I'm going to have to bail out of this. I need to let's just go ahead and leave for right now. So what I need to do is I need to come over here to Azure DevOps, and I need to essentially initialize the main branch. So it's this last option down here, okay? Essentially all it's going to do is create a README, and it's going to create a main branch. So once I do that, now I've got a main branch and I've got a README in here. I can come back over to my pipeline and I can finish configuring that. And unfortunately, that was a prerequisite step. So I do apologize. You're going to see me do this all over again, but we'll have to import the pipeline because I didn't save it. So let's browse. I've got it here already. We'll set it up. Click import. Take your hands away from the keyboard and the mouse. Don't touch anything. Just let it load. Okay. So now just immediately move over to the right sidebar. So from this pull down, you can choose Azure Pipeline, and I'm not going to go through that disclaimer I went through earlier. And now I'm going to go Windows latest, and now I'm going to choose Get Sources. So now with the Get Sources chosen, this automatically resolves to the one and only branch, the main branch. So I have that now, so I'm good to go. So now what I need to do is come down here into the agent, and right now at this particular moment, there's nothing for you to do here because there's some stuff down here that we need to focus on. So this is the Power Platform tool installer. There's nothing to configure. Don't delete it. It needs to be there. This one, I have it here disabled, but if you right click on it, you can enable and disable these items, these tasks in the agent jobs by simply right clicking and choosing enable disable. I use this to just test connectivity. So if you want, you can go through and select all of these and disable them, and then just enable this one, and you can do like a dry run just to make sure that your connections are working and you're not pulling your hair out, because if the connections fail, then you got to start there, and then that means you got to come all the way out to the service accounts or service connections and reconfigure them and copy and paste all that information in there that you need. Okay, so that being said, let's go ahead and set one of the connections. So who am I? Doesn't much matter. You can choose dev or prod. Remember, we set those up earlier. I'll just leave it as dev. Now, the Power Platform set solution version, this is going to be on the dev, okay? Because we want to start with the dev, and then we want to import it into the destination environment with that updated version. So we'll first set this first. And so we're going to set the version, and then we're going to export it. But where are we going to export it from? We're going to export it from, and we're choosing development. We're exporting from the development environment. And so this is all you have to do, guys. You just have to simply, build all of this information out down here, bit by bit, piece by piece. And so now I'm importing the solution. Where am I going to import it into? Well, I'm not going to import it into dev. This is the only item in the stack that you're going to choose the production environment, because this is where it is. Now, this publish artifact drop, this thing is set up in such a way to where that zip file that it downloads, it's going to put it in this artifact. And you'll probably need to prune this, because if you're doing the free version, it only stores, I think, 2 gigabytes of information. So over time, you're going to fill this thing up. There is a purge that you can do for artifacts. I think it's at the settings level and or at the organizational level, but go ahead and explore that on your own. I'm not going to go into that right now for this. This is something just to be aware of, that this will work, but keep an eye on your published artifacts and the amount of space that you have available to you, and set up and look at the policies around that for retention, because you can and will run out of space eventually, and you don't want to get caught by surprise. All right, so this is now technically configured. What I'm going to do is I'm going to choose this drop down. I don't want to queue anything. I just want to save it. So I'm going to choose save, and I'm going to just leave the defaults and click save. All right, we're not done yet, but we're almost done. We're going to come over here to variables. And under variables, I have two custom variables. This is the build number and the solution name. Let's go back over to this file, because this is now down to the last wire, or the last pieces of information. And you can use this DevOps template very flexibly, just like you can use the PowerShell script. All you have to do is go into the variables and tell it, what do I want to move and what do I want to not move. So at this point, Azure DevOps is going to handle the revisions for me. Now, if you're not sure what a revision is, it's essentially this last number. For the DevOps, I only need to provide the first three and the trailing period. So I am going to wipe this out up here, or try to. And then I'm going to paste in that, and I need my trailing period. So 50.0.1. And then the first version of it, because I have never run this pipeline before, it's going to start with version 1. So it'll be 50.0.1.1 when this is all said and done. So now I've set the last piece of information, and so I am good to go. Now, before I do that, I do want to try to provide as much education on all this stuff as I can. I believe it's under options. Here's the build number and the format, and so here's my variable build number. And then I'm concatenating that technically, but not, there's no concatenate function, it just happens. This $rev_r comes from the Azure DevOps platform itself, and there's a bunch of variables that you can use throughout this in a very creative way. If you want to know what that is, hover over this little icon here and then click this link for more information. It'll take you to a really great page that'll have configure and run or build numbers. And down here it gives a bunch of great examples. And these tokens are really variables. And so you can see, I think down here is my revision number, and it explains about what all of that is. But know that there's all these additional tokens slash variables that you can use throughout the configuration of your Azure DevOps pipeline. And so this is really great information to know that's there. And that was baked into the platform, or the Azure DevOps platform, under the options. So I've already set this up for you. You don't need to mess with it. Really, the only thing you need to be concerned with is the build number and the solution name, so that you can tell it what do you want to increment version-wise and what solution do you want to choose. All right, that being said, let's save and queue, and let's watch, hopefully, some magic happen without any whammies. But before we do that, let's go back over to the Power Platform. Let's go back into the make.powerapps.com experience. Let's notate a couple of things so that we know where we are and what's happening. So here's my HRPTO version 1.0.0.0. The solution is completely missing from my production environment, which is my David Soden environment. You can see there's no solution there. So no tricks up my sleeve. Just letting you know that Azure DevOps is going to handle all of this for us. So save and queue. And I don't have to provide anything. I can do a save and commit if I want. I'll just do save and run. And this will spin up my instance. And you can see down here, note at the bottom, it's going to say queued, and it'll go from queued to running. And we can watch all of this unfold like paint dry. When this is all said and done, the zip file will be located up here in this generalized area for the run. I'm going to click into the run so that we can actually watch this thing go from queue and kick in. And if there's any issues, these check marks will be not green, they'll be red or something. But right now, see, that one went through just fine. It's green, life is good. So I expect everything to go through and be green, assuming I set everything up and didn't fat finger any of my connections. Probably should have ran through that who am I test just to show you how that worked, but it works pretty much the same. It's only one thing, and we don't have to wait as long, but I'm pretty confident that this will go through. I took my time as best as I could, but sometimes mistakes do happen. And it looks like I am connecting. Yep. So the fact that I was able to do that, it looks good. So if I'm going to have a problem, it's because I fat fingered something in the production environment. But it looks like all of the authentication mechanisms for my development environment are all good. So we can see the export solutions happening well. Now, historically, this has taken about 5 minutes to run. So I will pause the video here just because we're about a minute and a half in. And by pausing the video, we'll come back. All right, guys, we made it through the other step of the export. We're now onto the import step. We're about 8 seconds, 9 seconds, 10 seconds into this step. So I'm going to pause again. All right, guys, we are almost done wrapping up here. It's publishing the artifact now to the drop. And it's imported successfully. And we're running towards the tail end, almost through the post check. It's taking kind of an unusually long time to post, but in any event. All right, so it looks like we are good to go, and we are done. Boom. All right, so everything is finalized. Life is good. So a couple things. To go out, we'll leave the job. We'll see all of the information is there. We see that we have a job success at the very bottom. Remember I told you up here we'd see the published item. So if we come up here to published item, we can click in. We go into the drop, and there's our zip file. So we can download the entire solution as it was taken in the snapshot. So now we can have this historically. Now, ideally, you may want to add additional steps to maybe check this into the repo. And you can do that with PowerShell, adding a PowerShell step in the pipeline. So I didn't do it in the pipeline that we have here for you. But just know that you can go in here to edit. And one of the steps that you can go ahead and add, if you were to add an item, just come over here, click plus, click PowerShell, and you simply just, go ahead and add PowerShell script to that particular one, and then you can take it and publish it into the repo from the drop or wherever it may be, and you can add it as a step towards the end and configure all of that information, okay? And then write your PowerShell script to test it. So that is it for this video, and the only thing that's really kind of left to show you is behind the scenes what happened in the environment. So if we come over here, you saw that the screen just refreshed, and I have version 50.0.1.1. If we go over to Azure DevOps, we can see the run. And we can see the revision a piece of that run. Oh, actually, I went too far out. I got to go into pipelines. Pipelines. Here's our pipeline. And we can see 50.0.1.1. Okay, if I run this again, it'll do 50.0.1.2. And it'll continue to do. That's that revisional item that I showed you about over here in the additional documentation. Somewhere in here. I don't know where it was, but anyway, it's somewhere down in this area. There it is. So that's where that revisional build number comes in. So inside of here, once again, because the solution is being done by the service principal, the owner will once again be the service principal. And we can see that here again. And if we switch over to the development environment and look into solutions, we'll see that the solution was incremented from 1.0.0.0 to 50.0.1.1. So Azure DevOps has now done its job through the pipeline. So that, again, is it for this video. You've now seen it work. Hopefully you have the same amount of success. Just go through these videos maybe a couple of times. If anything was hard to grasp, just, that's the nice thing about video. You can stop, rewind, and watch a couple of times until it kind of makes sense for you. All right, that's it. Thanks a lot, guys. We'll see you in the next series. Bye-bye.